West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Joining me now is CNN counterterrorism analyst and former FBI senior intelligence advisor Phil Mudd. Phil, great to see you. Thanks very much for being with us. You know, there are real consequences when people like that Florida state representative go out there and trash the integrity of the FBI. I know you said the other day that you received one of the most malicious threats that you've ever read, all because of your commentary about this search. And we've seen time and again examples over the last several days of just this, alarming, level of threats and heightened rhetoric in response to that search at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things you need to think about. The first would be threats to American citizens who happen to be FBI employees. If you look at what happened in Cincinnati, and you've seen reports today of armed individuals outside the office in Phoenix, this is a numbers game, Jim. If politicians start to encourage people to commit acts of violence against the FBI, even if you say defund the FBI, there's a violent fringe that will say, I want to take action. There might be 1/100th of 1% of the fringe who say that means I should commit an act of violence. Man, the FBI is an open organization. I served at both the CIA and the FBI. The CIA was closed, the FBI is open. Those offices are public facilities. Those offices interact with the public. If 1/100th of 1% of the population says, I need to commit an act of violence, those people, the FBI employees, are under threat. Let me close with one other issue on defunding. If you think that state and local police can follow the Iranians, follow the Chinese, follow the Russians, follow one of the most horrific things in America, that is cyber pornography against infants. If you think they can follow white-collar crime, if you think they can follow mortgage fraud, that is not a state and local problem. You may object to what happened in Mar-a-Lago, but if you say defund the FBI, let your kid be abused by an adult. That's what the FBI does. Good luck, Jim.
Yeah. No, it doesn't add up. It's not a realistic proposal. And it seems to be made when Donald Trump gets himself into hot water. That's when they want to go after federal law enforcement. And speaking of which, we know that the unredacted search warrant was leaked, meaning the names of these agents who are involved are out there. What are you hearing from your former colleagues that, when they conduct a search like this, this gets leaked and the agents' names and so on, it gets doxed?
So let me step you through what happens. You've got to go home to your spouse or your girlfriend and your children, and you tell them my name is leaked and people who might want to commit an act of violence might come to our home. You've got to go to your workplace and say, should we stay at home and our kids are going back to school? It's August, kids are going back to school. What do? Will you provide me with security? Will the government provide security? How long will they provide it for? It's not just about people who want to commit an act of violence against an FBI agent. I would ask them to consider, do you want to walk home to your family and your spouse and say, look over your shoulder when you go to the grocery store and ensure that you don't answer the door. It's that simple, Jim. It's that simple.
Yeah, and the motive here is intimidation. They want to intimidate people in law enforcement because of the nature of the work that they're doing. And it's not just the threats to the FBI. There's been an uptick in violent rhetoric online since the search, including phrases like lock and load. Another said Attorney General Merrick Garland, quote, needs to be assassinated. Simple as that. Another said kill all feds. You know, a lot of this, Phil, reminds me of the overheated rhetoric, the incendiary rhetoric that we saw in the run-up to January 6th. How worried are you that we might see another spasm of right-wing domestic terrorism in this country like we saw on January 6th?
I mean, I'm looking at this today and I'm surprised. This is the first time I've gotten this question. I'm surprised this question isn't coming up more often for a simple reason. When I followed extremists overseas, I never anticipated we would see this in America. We are. Extremists overseas in some ways have similarities to what we see in this instance. That is, they require leadership to tell them that what they're thinking is okay. And they require validation from that leadership to suggest to them that violence is okay. We saw that before January 6th. If you look at the rally. Right now, we're seeing that the former president of the United States sends a note, evidently, according to news reports, to the Attorney General before early this week saying, the country's in trouble. Is there anything I can do to help? After the raid, the former president of the United States, President Trump, said this is a fraud. This is a hoax. Some of that stuff might have been planted. The same thing that happened before January 6th is happening today. And I'm going to tell you, as we saw in Phoenix in the past 24 hours outside the FBI office, people with AR-15s and camo are going to say, I'm going to do something about it. That's dangerous. I think we're going to see another catastrophic event. I'm not sure, but I think so.
And it's all because Trump can't handle the scrutiny. He can't handle being the subject of an investigation, and he lashes out by declaring an enemy, whether it's the press or people in law enforcement and so on. And it just seems to be a recurring pattern, and here we are again.
It is. I mean, you could look at this one way if you're a standard president. Most of the presidents I dealt with, or my friends dealt with, they would go down and brief a president. Most presidents would say, I don't want anything top secret, or confidential in my house. That's a problem. This president says it's okay. He could have said, I'm sorry, get it out of here. I'm sure the FBI would have said, we don't want any problems here. We'll remove the boxes and secure them. If you'd like to see this information in the future, we can return it to you. I suspect that the explanation for what happened here is more nefarious. You could have a simple explanation that says the president doesn't care what's on the compound at Mar-a-Lago. You could have a more complex explanation that says this is good for the president. He's going to say the deep state is coming after me. This is another example that I'm a victim, and he's going to play this going into another election campaign. National security, Jim, used to stop the American shoreline. It no longer does. It's part of American electoral campaigns. That's what you're seeing here.
And the question has to be, I mean, he's offered up excuse after excuse after excuse as to why they're there, but he has not explained, his people have not explained, why does he have that stuff at Mar-a-Lago? Why did he have that stuff at Mar-a-Lago? We don't have an answer to that. And until we have an answer to that, we're not going to know the full story. Phil Mudd, thanks as always. We appreciate it.
It is Monday, the 15th of August of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays because, hey, in Americana, that's what happens, okay? You have everything that's happened on the weekends, you put it into a new dish for everyone's gourmand delight. Okay, welcome to Monday. How was your weekend? I had a bit of a tete-a-tete with, I don't know, they come out of the woodwork. What is it about me? I have such a caustic personality, apparently, even online, just in my written word. that causes certain elements of the human race to really just go crazy. They feel that it's put upon them to, well, as it was put aptly, teach me a lesson. Really? And what lesson were they trying to teach me? I was still trying to figure it out. Yeah, if you don't know, I had an impersonator, someone impersonating me. They made a fake Justice Putnam account and took some pictures or used some images without permission, which is a violation of terms of use, by the way. And actually posted a few things that I'm responding here. Hopefully they're not listening. But anyway, had some images of family stuff, and we're not quite sure how they got it. So I would warn whoever it is out there, there's cops in my family, okay? I'm just saying. They're not going to make a distinction about whether you're teaching me a lesson or not, okay? They might just, I'm just saying. So you better comply or else. Anyway, that was enough of a concern that I actually went through the protocol, which is not easy, to prove that I am me and this other person's making a fake account and harassing my followers on Twitter. Now, that's not fair. And I think it has something to do with, basically, I think I called Rittenhouse, a MAGAt, not Nazi Jungen, something like that. I also love it that the only people who complain about being called Nazis are Nazis. They always say, you call everyone a Nazi. No, I only call the Nazis Nazis. I don't call everyone Nazis. Get out of here. Jeez. But I've been around the block a few times, and it's not like we just threw that term around willy-nilly. In fact, the only time we might have had our little asses swatted was the overuse of Nazi. You Nazi, because it diminishes what went on. But when the experts, and those in the family who are experts also, by the way, are now saying, yeah, you know what's happening? This is a fascist takeover, and we call it Nazi for short. You call it what it is. But anyway, it was a defense of Rittenhouse in a sense, but only because it was sort of veiled in a little bit, but it was one of these Gish Gallop distractions where they try to make you run through hoops. Now I'm talking about this perpetrator, not Twitter, because Twitter has their own running through hoops. I'll get back to it. To make you basically like, I told this troll, I am not your dancing monkey. They come into my timeline. That's the other thing. I made some sort of comment about Rittenhouse, and they come into my timeline and tell me how I'm supposed to act. As if I have perpetuated some sort of divisive aspect in their lives when they took the effort to come into my timeline and harass me. Now, I didn't consider harassment in the beginning until they started posting pictures that were in a way trying to dox my family. I'm just telling you, that's not going to be safe for anyone involved. Jeez, give me a break. They don't know my family. Anyway, so I had to jump through the hoops for Twitter. They want you to submit a picture of your government ID. Oh, I'm going to put that online? Now, they purport that, they get rid of all the identifying information about you. Sure they do. But it's a government-issued ID. I mean, I suppose anybody can get it anyway, right? But, I had to first make sure, just for my own appeasement, that it was really Twitter. Because you never know. What if it was the troll acting like Twitter to get more identifying information to endanger us even more? Now, I'm just saying, when you endanger us, that's it's not just us endangered. Okay, I'm just giving a hint. In my extended family, I'm just saying. Okay. If you think that I go off the handle, jeez, I kid. We were taught to be nonviolent and peaceful, loving individuals in the nuclear family. The extended family, I got to tell you, be careful. Okay, so Twitter did their thing. I got the notice, apparently came in late last night, and I missed it. But when I awoke and arose this morning and turned all the machines on and got everything humming and whatnot, checked some email, and there it was. So the image, I kind of jumped ahead. I had to send several images because apparently to compress it to the size of the file that they allow, I was just like a tick over the 5 megabytes. Just a tick. And they would reject it. So I'm compressing, and, I wasn't aware, but when I compressed it would degrade the picture into a garish blur, shall we say. So they couldn't really read, like, my date of birth and, the identifiers that they needed, so I guess they can drain my bank account. I hope not. I did check, and it was Twitter. But still, you never know. I mean, didn't they get busted for giving up some information about some Saud dissident, and then that guy got killed? I'd be careful. Anyway, so they took this fake account down, and I was told, some other folks out there, followers, and just people who came across it and thought, this is really weird, and it is, because it wasn't a parody account. I don't warrant a parody account. I'm not a blue check. Am I supposed to feel honored that someone went through the effort to do this? I guess. It's not my first rodeo in terms of right-wing harassment. I've been on right-wing death lists, and I'm not kidding. The cops were involved when I was 15. I was on a list called the Communist Obituary in high school at El Dorado. No wonder Agent Orange wrote that song about El Dorado. They hated that place. I don't blame them. Jeez. El Dorado, El Dorado, El Dorado. Anyway, I was on a death list when I was only 15. Get out of here. And, of course, there were some very violent ones that my family fielded, my sisters. I felt sorry for them because, they were convinced that I was going to get popped on stage at the Impeach Nixon library because I was like the MC. And they were convinced because there was like all sorts of death threats called in to the family home phone. That was when it was Ma Bell too. The big rotary phones. God, they were great, weren't they? I guess. And then my sisters got a Princess phone. They probably fielded on their Princess phones at that point. And they were absolutely frightened. There were bomb threats called at Cal State Fullerton at the history department to my dad's office specifically. And that was, I'm not even talking about the crosses that were burned on our front lawn when we lived in the San Gabriel Valley when we first moved from Oregon to Southern California. And my professor father began his 35-plus year stint at Cal State Fullerton. We were there for a little bit before the crosses were burned on our lawn. But, so I thought right-wing violence was just a normal way of life. And apparently it is. Because look where we are. Threatening the FBI. Jeez. Only mobsters do that. Capone did it. Gotti did it. They all did. And now Trump and his minions are. Boy, he's got some capos, though. Sheesh. My God. What do they call it? The gravy seals? There's a lot of Rotown types out there, but you can't blame them. I mean, they've been sitting around thinking about doing this stuff for a while, and now they can. It's finally come to fruition. I love it also when they're asked, like, why are you doing what you're doing? And they always say, I don't like the direction this country is going. And what direction is that? Democracy? I know, you hate that, don't you, you brown shirt goose stepper? Jeez. And anyway, when I'm talking about the Nazis, I'm not talking about the Nazis of the Holocaust. I'm talking about the Nazis right now. And we can call Orban a Nazi, and they love that guy. Now that's a guy, that is a fascist that can make the trains run on time. If they only could have had that with Donnie. Deep down, they really wish they could have had that. On the other hand, there's many a faction in the United States that are just complete anarchist and destruction types, eliminationists, I believe that they would be referred to as, who just want to see it all burn. They just want to see it all burn. There's a famous quote from Jerry Rubin when he was asked, what's going to happen when you pull down all the edifices of America, when the Capitol building or whatever, all these things that are important to us, the Smithsonian, everything. What are you going to do when it's all burning? And Rubin replied, I'm just going to sit down and groove on the rubble. I got to tell you, as a kid, that didn't really appeal to my sense of fairness, shall we say. We want to take ourselves back to caveman times and build ourselves back up again. Give me a break. I didn't think that was a very smart thing to do. And then what did Rubin end up being? A stockbroker. There was a reason why we felt a little, maybe we got to stand back from that guy. Seems like a self-promoter. Seems like. Isn't it weird? Back during the anti-war movement and stuff, the ones who were like the biggest self-promoters that eventually became stockbrokers, or I don't know, self-actualization gurus. Yeah, Maslow, this. I'll give you a hierarchy of needs. Speaking of which, I suppose we need to attend to the curated part of the show. I gave you all the... Oh, I haven't actually given you all of the inside baseball info. I should mention we are in the final week or weeks of getting my mom prepped for her hip replacement surgery that will be occurring on the 29th. And I should warn people, that is a Monday. And I have to have her in the hospital before 5:30 in the morning. So we won't have a show that day, but there will be some great content. And it doesn't happen in the 11 years that we've been running Netroots Radio, and about that long since we've had some iteration of this show, because there was an original iteration, and you know what that one was. Anyway, for the 11 years, it's rare that we ever have missed a show. But it is one that we will, because Mom needs to be in there very early, and so I won't have time to put things together or even get back to the microphone in time. I'll have to turn it into somewhat of a robot station, but we have those capabilities because, you do. And we like to handcraft everything here, but every now and then it's nice to have automation. It is. So that's a heads up for the 29th, but we are in the final weeks, days of getting her prepped, and so we have quite a few appointments, some classes she's supposed to attend. Also, they got to make sure her weight is correct, because when they put her under, anesthesia is by weight, so you never know when people pack it on or take it off. So we're monitoring that as well. But my poor mom has been in some terrible agony, and she shouldn't have to live like that. And this is a good thing that will be happening. And her surgeon, am I part of this? I'm just kidding. Her surgeon, comes with great references and is well respected. And quite successful in what he does, too. When I say successful, I always like to see people live. And they do. So that's always a good thing. And Mom's strong enough to have it happen, and let's do it, because she shouldn't have to live in this agony. No one should. No one. All right. Let us then attend to the curated part of the show, as I alluded to some time ago. Yes, rhetoric and threats against the FBI and the DOJ because of the Mar-a-Lago search. I don't get it. Okay. All right. Is reminiscent of events that led up to the January 6th insurrection. And, it's good to hear the experts corroborate what we have suspected or actually known. On the rest of the menu, a state police inquiry found evidence the MAGAt plot in Michigan to breach voting machines points to a coordinated national pattern. Really? Some of the arrested Capitol insurgents are trying to profit off their January 6 crimes. Yeah, I don't know. Everybody gets a chance to go for the brass ring. And speaking of which, Krysten Sinema took over $1 million of Wall Street money over the past year and then killed the carried interest tax on private equity profits. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Italian right-wing nationalist parties threaten European democracy. And Zofia Posmysz, whose semi-autobiographical Holocaust story, The Passenger, which reached the opera stage, has died at age 98. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who will be attending Netroots Nation 22 in Pittsburgh in just a few days. And do stay tuned for some great content from Netroots Nation 22 by Kelly Lincoln. First in-person meetup in 2 years. Yeah. So we're looking forward to it. Thank you, Kelly. If you take a gander, yeah, we talk like that around here. We do. If you take a gander to the left of the chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, there's a link to our Patreon page. And please send us money. The costs of our bills keep increasing. They do. And your help really helps. If you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, boy, have those gone up too. But if you could afford that, send that to us once a month. It really does help us pay our bills. And all kidding aside, thank you for your generosity, because when we pay our bills, the lights stay on. Isn't that nice? And everything seems to work, and that's even nicer. And we have a lot ahead of us, and we appreciate your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, please do, at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and a hell of a lot more. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, and then you can find that link on my Twitter account at Justice Putnam. And I am Justice Putnam, not the Justice _ whatever that guy was trying to get away with. How dare they? If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And the Deep Archive, the library of Netroots radio shows over 11 years plus, going on 12, can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay, got all those particulars out of the way. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is out of the Washington Post by Patrick Marley and Tom Hamburger. 8 months after the 2020 presidential election, Robin Hawthorne did not expect anyone to ask for her township's voting machines. The election had gone smoothly, she said, just as others had that she had overseen for 17 years as the Rutland Charter Township clerk in rural western Michigan. But now, a sheriff's deputy and investigator were in her office, asking her about her township's 3 vote tabulators, suggesting that they somehow had been programmed with a microchip to shift votes from Trump to Joe Biden, and asking her to hand over one for inspection. What the heck is going on, she recalled thinking. The surprise visit may have been an out-of-the-blue thing, as Hawthorne described it, but it was one element of a much broader effort by figures who deny the outcome of the 2020 vote to access voting machines in a bid to prove fraud that experts say does not exist. In states across the country, including Colorado, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, attempts to inappropriately access voting machines have spurred investigations. Inappropriate is just a nice way of saying it's illegal. They have also sparked concern among election authorities that while voting systems are broadly secure, breaches by those looking for evidence of fraud could themselves compromise the integrity of the process and undermine confidence in the vote, and that is a feature, my friend, not a bug. In Michigan, the efforts to access the machines jumped into public view this month when the state attorney general, Dana Nessel, requested a special prosecutor to be assigned and look into a group that includes her likely Republican opponent, Matthew DePerno. The expected Republican nominee, Nessel's office wrote in a petition filed on August 5th, based on the findings of a state police investigation, was one of the prime instigators of a conspiracy to persuade Michigan clerks to allow unauthorized access to voting machines. Others involved, according to the filing, included a state representative and Berry County Sheriff Dar Leaf. Although Hawthorne rebuffed the request by investigators to examine one of her machines, a clerk in nearby Irving Township handed one over to the pair, despite state and federal laws that limit who can access them. About 150 miles north of Hawthorne's Township, 3 clerks in 2 other Michigan counties turned over voting machines and other equipment to third parties, public records show. The petition says tabulators were taken to hotel rooms and Airbnb rentals in Oakland County, where a group of 4 men broke into the tabulators and performed tests on them. Were they of the sexual nature? The petition says that DePerno was present in a hotel room during some of the testing. Officials got the tabulators back weeks or months later, in one instance at a meeting in a carpool parking lot. DePerno has denied any wrongdoing, as has Leaf, the Berry County Sheriff. The DePerno campaign issued a statement calling the petition for a special prosecutor an incoherent liberal fever dream of lies, which apparently means it is the absolute truth and they are scared shitless. Once election officials lose control of voting machines, the machines can no longer be used because of the risk of hacking, Moreover, voters can lose faith in the country's electoral infrastructure when they hear about machines that have not been adequately protected. Until recently, said Tammy Patrick, who works with election officials around the country as a senior advisor at the nonprofit Democracy Fund, it seemed far-fetched that election networks could be exposed in the way they were in Michigan. Unfortunately, we have a number of instances in the last year or so where this sort of thing has happened around the country, she said, and it is deeply troubling. Michael Kunzelman of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. Facing prison time and dire personal consequences for storming the U.S. Capitol, some January 6 defendants are trying to profit from their participation in the deadly riot, using it as a platform to drum up cash, promote business endeavors, and boost social media profiles. A Nevada man jailed on riot charges asked his mother to contact publishers for a book he was writing about, quote, the Capitol incident, end quote. A rioter from Washington State helped his father hawk clothes and other merchandise bearing slogans such as Our House and images of the Capitol building. A Virginia man released a rap album, at least that's what they call it, with riot-themed songs and a cover photograph of him sitting on a police vehicle outside the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Those actions are sometimes complicating matters for defendants when they face judges at sentencing, as prosecutors point to the profit-chasing activities and seeking tougher punishments. The Justice Department, in some instances, is trying to claw back money the rioters have made off the insurrection. Now, many rioters have paid a steep personal price for their actions on January 6. At sentencing, rioters often ask for leniency on the grounds that they already have experienced severe consequences for their crimes. They lost jobs or entire careers, marriages fell apart, friends and relatives shunned them or even reported them to the FBI. Strangers have sent them hate mail and online threats, and they racked up expensive legal bills to defend themselves against federal charges ranging from misdemeanors to serious felonies. Websites and crowdfunding platforms set up to collect donations for Capitol riot defendants try to portray them as mistreated patriots or political prisoners. An anti-vaccine medical doctor who pleaded guilty to illegally entering the Capitol founded a nonprofit that raised almost $500,000 for her legal expenses. The fundraising appeal of Dr. Simone Gold's group, America's Frontline Doctors, did not mention her guilty plea, prosecutors noted. Another rioter, a New Jersey gym owner who punched a police officer during the siege, raised more than $30,000 in online donations for a Patriot Relief Fund to cover his mortgage payments and other monthly bills. Prosecutors cited the fund in recommending a fine for Scott Fairlamb, who was serving a prison sentence of more than 3 years. A few rioters are writing books about the mob's attack or have marketed videos that they shot during the riot. A unique provision in Adam Johnson's plea agreement allows the U.S. government to collect profits from any book he gets published over the next 5 years. Images of Johnson posing for photographs with Pelosi's podium went viral after the riot. Prosecutors said they insisted on the provision after learning that Johnson intends to write a memoir of some sort. Disco of the AP brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Krysten Sinema, who single-handedly thwarted her party's longtime goal of raising taxes on wealthy investors, received nearly $1 million over the past year from private equity professionals, hedge fund managers, and venture capitalists whose taxes would have increased under the plan. For years, Democrats have promised to raise taxes on such investors who pay a significantly lower rate on their earnings than ordinary workers. But just as they closed in on that goal last week, Sinema forced a series of changes to her party's $740 billion election year spending package, eliminating a proposed carried interest tax increase on private equity earnings while securing a $35 billion exemption that will spare much of the industry from a separate tax increase other huge corporations now have to pay. The bill, with Sinema's alterations intact, was given final approval by Congress on Friday and is expected to be signed by President Joe Biden this week. The Sinema has long aligned herself with the interests of private equity, hedge funds, and venture capitalists, helping her net at least $1.5 million in campaign contributions since she was elected to the House a decade ago. But the $983,000 she has collected since last summer more than doubled what the industry donated to her during all of her preceding years in Congress combined. The donations, which make Sinema one of the industry's top beneficiaries in Congress, serves a reminder of the way that high-power lobbying campaigns can have dramatic implications for the way legislation is crafted, particularly in the evenly divided Senate, where there are no Democratic votes to spare. Indeed. Well, let us now get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Gabby Nicole. This week, Bullet Train Off the Rails. Director David Leitch has added another successful action-packed film to his repertoire. We follow Brad Pitt as an unlucky hitman/courier, codenamed Ladybug, in his first mission back from a soul-searching break. His mission? To recover a briefcase. Seems simple enough, right? But not so much. The other passengers include two other hitmen, a mob boss's son, a father seeking revenge for his son, a scheming girl, a Mexican gangster, and a venomous snake. Each character plays a role in the advancement of Ladybug's understanding of the situation, and you can relate to his confusion as the action unfolds. Leach uses a Tarantino-esque storytelling method similar to Pulp Fiction, where the characters are intertwined through their criminal pursuits. Imagine the characters in that classic all trapped on a train speeding through Japan. Brian Tyree Henry and Aaron Taylor-Johnson's performances of Lemon and Tangerine respectively are particularly charming. You can't help but root for them. They bring both aggression and humor to the film that pair well with Brad Pitt's quips throughout. The most pleasantly surprising casting choice, though, is Joey King as the prince. Her character is compelling as her motives remain a mystery for most of the film. Sandra Bullock only has a few minutes of screen time, but her voice as Ladybug's handler provides an anchor to the outside world as the action on the train descends into chaos. Action film fans will love this one, as the twists keep you on the edge of your seat, but I wouldn't recommend it for the squeamish. There's virtually constant violence where protagonists and bad guys alike succumb to gruesome, bloody, if creative deaths. And you shouldn't get too attached to any one character because the action on board the bullet train leaves few survivors. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Gabby Nicole. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
From corporate polluters to political bosses, power elites try to create a myth of inevitability, trying to make workaday people feel helpless, too small to change the injustices of the system. Don't bother is their message. But the feisty residents of Boxtown, Tennessee definitely did bother when they learned that a couple of profiteering fossil fuel giants were targeting them. Boxtown, a historic black neighborhood of Memphis settled by former slaves 160 years ago, was considered by Valero Energy and Plains All-American Pipeline to be politically powerless. So when these multi-billion-dollar petro-powers decided to ram a dirty and dangerous pipeline through the Memphis area, Boxtown was their chosen route. The rich Texas oil barons even sneeringly called the lower-income community the point of least resistance. Boy, did they get that wrong. Those, quote, small people of Boxtown resisted fiercely and smartly. Most flat out refused to sell their family land at the thieving price offered by the oil slicks. They forged a unified grassroots coalition, Memphis Community Against the Pipeline, reached out to other neighborhoods and educated locals about the terrible safety records of the two corporate plunderers. They also enlisted environmental groups to help beat back the strong-arm attempt by Valero and Plains All-American to seize the people's property through eminent domain. It's a long story with many ups and downs, but the inspiring essence of it is that local, quote, nobodies defeated the big money and raw racist arrogance of a powerhouse duo of absentee corporate elites that disrespected and misjudged them. This is Jim Hightower saying grassroots communities and coalitions are winning such gutsy fights against corporate exploiters all across America. Remember this, even the smallest dog can lift its leg on the tallest building.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1971. That Sunday, President Richard Nixon addressed the nation in a speech that preempted the popular television show Bonanza. His subject, the state of the economy. The speech was timed before the stock markets opened on Monday morning. The president announced a 90-day freeze to wages and prices. He took this step in an effort to curb soaring inflation. Inflation had topped 6% in 1970 and stayed above 4% 10% the following year. The president declared, "The time has come for decisive action. Action that will break the vicious circle of spiraling prices and costs." President Nixon also announced the suspension of tying the U.S. dollar to the gold standard. The policies became known as the Nixon Shock. A cost of living council was established to oversee the plan. Initially, the public embraced the plan. At first, the plan seemed to help curb inflation. Many rank-and-file workers approved, but leaders from organized labor worried about how the policy would impact contract negotiations. AFL-CIO President George Meany called the plan unequitable, unjust, unfair, and unworkable. Inflation started to rise again. Nixon continued to implement similar measures for a total of nearly 1,000 days. The end result? Inflation had reached double digits by 1974. One of the impacts of these policies were that regular families had a harder time making ends meet. More women entered the workforce. During the 1970s, the dollar lost a third of its value. The Nixon shock shaped the economy of the 1970s and had a long-term negative impact on working families. In the 4 decades since the plan was implemented, 7 out of 10 workers have not been able to keep up with the cost of living. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs about the same as what we had over the weekend, which was the low to mid-90s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour with abundant sunshine. Clear skies overnight with lows in the upper 50s, low 60s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then mainly sunny tomorrow with highs in the mid to upper 90s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon stands at 492,084 confirmed cases, with 568 confirmed deceased, with numbers expected to rise by the next update. Grass pollen is rated as low here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 24 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is in the very high range at level 8. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.03 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 85%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 83 degrees and sunny. Paris is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Rome is 90 and fair, though they have a heat advisory. Kyiv is 78 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 71 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 85 and fair. Tokyo is 86 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees and fair with a small craft advisory for the bay and offshore because of fog. And New York is 80 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The leader of Italy's Democratic Party warned of the threats that Italy's right-wing nationalistic parties pose to European democracy in a video released in multiple languages, and promised that his party would keep Italy at the center of the European Union if it wins the country's early parliamentary election next month. The video by Democratic leader Enrico Letta comes days after the leader of the far-right Brothers of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, did a multi-language video of her own to dispute suggestions that her election as premier would endanger democracy in Italy and threaten the management of EU pandemic funds. Meloni, whose party controversially uses the symbol of a flame borrowed from a neo-fascist party, said in an August 10 video that the Italian political right has unambiguously condemned the legacy of fascism. Well, that's what they say. At the moment, the center-left Democratic Party and the Brothers of Italy are leading parties in opinion polls going into Italy's September 25 parliamentary election. Neither looks assured of having enough votes to govern alone.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Zofia Posmysz, a Polish radio journalist on assignment in Paris, was crossing the Place de la Concorde in 1959 when she heard from among a group of tourists a voice that shattered the beauty of the scene. The speaker, a woman, was German. Briefly, excruciatingly, Miss Posmysz thought she recognized the voice of that of the Auserwähler, or guard, who had overseen her at Auschwitz. Miss Posmysz, a Catholic, was 18 when she was arrested with other students in 1942 and spent more than 2 years at the Nazi death camp. Days before the liberation of Auschwitz in January of 1945, she was sent on a death march and transferred first to Ravensbrück and then another camp in Germany, where she was imprisoned until World War II ended in Europe. The voice Miss Posmysz overheard that day in the Place de la Concorde did not belong to her overseer. Still, the encounter unsettled whatever peace Miss Posmysz had found in the decade and a half since her liberation. I started to think, what should I do? She told the Chicago Tribune years later, recalling the moments when she thought she had come face to face with her former guard. Should I report her to the police immediately, or as a former SS Nazi, or should I go to her and ask, "How goes it, Frau Overseer?" Miss Posmysz, who died on August 8th at 98, went on to a noted career as a writer, exploring the Holocaust in fiction and drama. She turned her experience in Paris into a radio play and then a 1962 novel, The Passenger, in which the central character, a former concentration camp guard, sets sail on a cruise ship and meets a fellow traveler with an unmistakable resemblance to an inmate, much like Miss Posmysz, whom the guard had thought was dead. The story was adapted for film by Polish director Andrzej Monk, who died in 1961 during production, and later that decade for the opera stage by the Polish-born composer Mieczysław Weinberg and Russian librettist Alexander Medved. Dmitry Shostakovich, the Soviet-era Russian composer, was said to have declared the opera a perfect masterpiece, but communist censors in the Soviet Union, apparently deeming the work insufficiently laudatory of Soviet sacrifices during World War II, allowed the opera to languish for decades until it nearly disappeared. Survivors and scholars have long debated the morality of attempting to represent the Holocaust in fiction, music, and art. I also used to think no words could express such an experience, the London Guardian quoted Miss Posmysz as saying, but that's changed, because even if 1/100th of the truth is told, a fragment will live on in future generations. That is what we owe those who died there. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.